Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the art studio today. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be going over the Lumix S1 AF menu system. So we'll be talking about the autofocus system and all the different menus that are available. It is a little different from the Lumix G9 and GH5. A couple of more modes that have been added that I find quite interesting. We'll go over it all, so stay tuned. So here on our channel we give tech talks and do some reviews of different camera systems that we use, lens reviews and all of those good things, and we dive into the menu system and share information that we gather along the way, as well as taking you behind the scenes once a week of our lives as a married couple that makes their living as full-time artists and entrepreneurs. And if you joined us last week, you know that we went behind the scenes in New York. We did a speaking engagement in New York City at the B&H Depth of Field conference. And with that said, afterwards, I'm like, I'm gonna hang out at the Lumix table for a while and see what people think of the S1. And several people came up, picking up the camera, saying, well, why'd you build it bigger? You know, we're used to all these smaller cameras. I'm like, well, pick it up. Then tell me how you think about it. And people would pick it up and they'd hold it in their hands and they go, wait a second, I like this. I like how it feels balanced in my hand with the bigger lenses. And so I think you have to actually pick it up and mess with it a little bit to really get an understanding of why Lumix built a slightly bigger body. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. The next thing that people would say is, are you getting any banding issues and high contrast scenes or extreme ISO? And I'm thinking, I've never seen banding on any Lumix camera. And so to me, I'm like, well, what is causing that? And they're like, it must be the phase detect. So phase detect autofocus gets a lot of positive reviews, rightfully so. It's the gold standard for video autofocus. But my understanding of it, now that I got home and started researching it, is that it's got some serious issues with banding in many of the cameras when you're pushing ISO or trying to keep maximum dynamic range together. And so maybe there's good reason that Panasonic is trying to stick with DFD and make the most of it, because we really don't have those issues as Lumix shooters, and that's kind of an interesting thing. With that said, the new autofocus menu is a little bit different. I think we should dive in, take a look at it, and explore that autofocus menu just a little bit. So let's get right to the chase here. Boom. So the different than the G9 is that the G9, you would push this button, which was the F1 button, to access your autofocus. And then you had a dial up top here for switching from manual to auto, to continuous to single. But now they've kind of put it all in one place. This is your autofocus dial and button. So you turn here to switch your modes, and then you press here to actually see the different modes inside of the camera. So intuitive, a step forward, and I'm happy about that. Let's dive into the camera itself. I'm just gonna turn and face the camera out my art studio window here, just to kind of give you a perspective, and we'll take you into the physical camera. Now here, I'm just kind of tapping on the LCD, and what's interesting about this, yes, it did focus on the doors here, but when I press the button to go into the menu system, what we're going to see is that I'm in face, eye, body, animal detect mode. And you can actually switch that and turn the animal detect mode on and off just by tapping on the LCD touchscreen. And I guess the new mode for the face and eye detect now also has the ability to track animals that are four-legged, like cats, dogs, and even birds. And that's an interesting new feature. I use face detect all the time personally, and I'm just gonna brighten this up pretty bright and just step in front of the camera. Let me just do a quick focus, and I will kind of show you what's happening. What happens when we go into face and eye detect is that it draws boxes around anything with eyes. And as I move, as you can see, if I'm offset, it finds me. If I move to this side, it finds me and focuses on me as well, and that's a beautiful thing. And so with that said, The way I use it and the way I love it is if I'm doing close-up portraits in the studio, I don't worry about getting eyes in focus, because what you can actually do that's interesting on the G9 and the new S1 is you can choose, do I want the closer eye to be in focus or the far eye to be in focus, by being in that mode, doing a quick focus, and then tapping on the LCD. And if you tap on the close eye, it'll focus on that close eye. If you tap on the far eye, you'll see the difference. It'll focus on that far eye. I also love it because if I'm doing anything with models, they tend to move. They go offset here, they go here, they're constantly moving. I used to chase my subjects with a joystick on the back of a camera. Now I let Face and Eye Detect do it for me, and I love that mode. So it'll be interesting to get out and play with the new Animal Detect feature as well and see where that brings us here in the future. Let me just focus real quick. We'll dive into another mode. Tapping on the mode button on the back of the camera, we're also going to click the dial to the right, and whoops, I did it too quick. And this is the tracking mode. And what tracking is doing that's a little bit interesting and different is it's going to track a subject, say, running towards you. Let's say a football player on a football field. But if you're in the right metering mode, it will not only track the subject running towards you, but it will even change the exposure. So let's say you're photographing a football game, it's night, Friday night lights, the lights are on, and if you've ever shot football, you know that the field's not lit evenly. Well, as they run towards you, it will also adjust as they get to a brighter or darker part of the field. It will also adjust exposure. So that's a beautiful thing for those of us that shoot sports. That's the idea behind it, and I found that it works pretty well also, so kind of interesting. Diving back into the menu, we'll click on the back button. Well, we don't need to, we're already there. This is the 225 AF area. So basically what this is good for is if you're not sure what your subject is, it's going to be offset, moving around, things of that nature, let the camera do the work for you, and it kind of does an evaluative mode in 225 point area. This is new. This is the new AF for vertical and horizontal subjects. And what's interesting about it, I can actually tap on the back LCD and move that around if I wish, which is kind of a nice feature. And I can also even change the size of this as well. So as you can see on the back here, I'm just gonna, well, let me tap on it first. I'm gonna increase the size by turning the dial that I would normally adjust shutter speed for, and it's going to make that adjustment for me. This also works for vertical as well, so if you're doing buildings, kind of a new mode that we don't find in the G9 that I think could be quite interesting for some of us doing landscape work especially. If we go into the oval mode or the zone mode, which is also available on the G9 and GH5, what's nice about this is if we move our finger around the back LCD, you can see we're deciding where we want it to be. But the other interesting thing is you can actually also increase the size of it by turning that shutter speed dial and decide for yourself how big or small your subject is and what it is that you want the camera to focus on. So you can control placement, you can also control the size. Clicking on the back screen again, we'll go forward again. This is a new mode also. It says one area plus, and only thing I can gather with it is that it's kind of like the one area mode, except if I click here, you'll see that it's actually putting boxes around the one area. So it must be evaluating a little bit more as I turn the dial and change the size of it as well. Clicking on the back mode once again, this is available on the G9 as well, and it's just a single point mode. And as I look through the camera here, let's see, yep, we're in focus. Basically, this is the single point. I can move it around where I want it to be, and I can change the size of that single point mode so that it will be to my personal taste and the benefit of the subject. Tapping again, one last mode. This is the pinpoint mode, and it does just that. If you need to pinpoint a specific spot, you can. And I'm just going to take this over to the back railing out by the pool here and click on it. And what you'll see is it pulls up a box for me. And that's a beautiful thing because it allows you to really pinpoint and see in that zoomed in box exactly what you're focused on or what is in focus. So Yes, the autofocus mode is quite interesting on the new S1. We've been exploring it. It does autofocus, it autofocuses well. We're still waiting to get the final firmware. We're at the 0.6 firmware, and in a week, my wife and I are actually going down to a big Lumix meeting where the engineers will go through all of it, and they'll explain to us how does the AI work, and what is it actually doing in the camera, and what have been the improvements, and how can we maximize autofocus for video versus autofocus for stills. And we get to kind of digest all of that and learn the inner workings of the camera. And from that point, we should have the most up-to-date firmware for launch, and we'll be able to explore it further and start sharing real-world examples of how fast it works and how creative it is and how does it compare to the G9 and other camera systems out there. But I can already see some improvements for video autofocus. I've actually been doing some tracking, some different things like that in test. It seems smoother, seems to find it more gracefully find your subject. But again, we'll explore that in more detail in future chapters once we get through a little bit of understanding of how it works and why it works. With that said, I appreciate you, everybody. Join us here on our channel, both behind the scenes and in Tech Talks, as we share all that we know about photography and the new cameras and how to make a living as a professional artist and entrepreneur. We appreciate you, everybody. Have a great one. Our channel focuses on creativity, living the dream, and a positive outlook. Subscribe and join us. Go behind the scenes via our vlog, but also learn from us via Tech Talks, tutorials, and reviews from the perspective of two full-time artists at work.